And here we are with BrianVee at WhyWeWork, and I have the great pleasure of speaking with Chelsea of Pyper. Chelsea,
Mhm.
how are
Mhm.
you doing
Mhm.
this fine evening for you?
Yes, I'm doing really good. I'm in a good spot. Kids are occupied. It was, for us in the Pacific Northwest, I'm about an hour from Seattle in the state of Washington in the good old USA. It's overcast, and for me, that means I'm productive during that day. If it's too
Is
sunshiny, I'm not out. I'm outside.
is that home? Is that original home? Is that Washington? That's.
Correct. Yeah, born and raised here.
Can you tell us, and even me, I mean, we are acquaintances. We've known each other for, I don't know now. What was it? 2006, 2006, 2007, maybe? Something
Yeah,
like that. So 13 more.
yeah.
I mean,
13.
it was a couple of years, I don't know. But it was a while ago.
It was. Yep.
So we know a little bit of one another and about one
Hmm.
another. But in terms of work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and growing up in Seattle? And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about the other day, just wondering, what the concept of work and where that came from. And I was kind of doing a kind of an internal parallel when I was looking at your last interview with Murray, and like him, I had a paper out that was my first kind of like, hey, welcome to the world of work, and that was awesome. I really enjoyed that experience. I think I was 10 or 11. But for me, like the role model for work was my stepdad. He was such a hard worker, and he really kind of encapsulated what I kind of deem like the middle class work ethic, because that's where we come from. And he was always, gosh, by day he had a federal job, and by evening he was a real estate agent. So he was always working, and weekends were family time. So I think my idea of work started pretty young, and I had a great time with that paper route. That was for sure. Just, I think I was only making $30 a month. And this is back in the, gosh, late 80s, early 90s. So yeah, that was pretty fun. It was a fun experience learning about work.
I had, and maybe you heard it when I said it, I think I mentioned to Marie, but I
Hmm.
also had a paper route of which I got fired from.
Oh,
But
oh no.
did you have like an influence to get that first job in the paper? Because I remember, if I can
Hmm.
remember the guy's name, I know um, Jody Upshaw. I think there was a couple of guys that
Hmm.
in my neighborhood, and they were like
Hmm.
rock star paper route boys or
Ooh, okay.
people, right? And they just
Newsboys.
did it. And they had these big bags, and just people in the
Hmm.
neighborhood knew like these guys did this job well. And as
Hmm.
the more I, like you're mentioning paper route, I thought about it, and Murray mentioned it. And a lot of
Hmm.
people, kids have had paper routes. And I'm like, I
Hmm.
think I was one, wanting some money, needing to do
Yeah.
something with my time. But there was just some kids around that were doing it well. And I was like,
Hmm.
I want it, because then I think they had a nice bike, because
Hmm.
they were
Yeah.
able to deliver the paper with their bike. And my route was walking like the main drag of my hometown. So
Hmm.
maybe I could have had a bike, I guess, but I think I had a lot of papers, which is the reason why I got fired, because I threw them all away. Did you know
That's great.
someone in the paper industry of delivering papers that you just said, maybe this would be interesting?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was like my second job. Because my first job, I got hired to work as a at a church, helping with Sunday school, like watching the kids.
Yeah.
And I was actually fired from that job. And I remember the day, and it was something like a few bucks an hour, but still, that, gosh, when you're 10 or 11, that's a lot of money. And honestly, like, I remember just doing something stupid, just being a kid, and they're like,
Mhm.
well, you can't act like this, you got to watch the kids. And I'm sure I probably wasn't doing my best. And that's when I think it might have been the minister's wife that came in, and she goes, why don't you just get a paper route job instead?
Is
And I
that
was like, huh. That's what she said. And I was like, oh,
I'll show
okay,
you.
well,
I
I
will.
guess. I know.
That's not
So
very
I
nice.
did. Um, and it wasn't like an everyday thing like a huge paper, but it was like a Wednesday delivery. So, for me, it was like the day before I would get like they drop off the newspapers. I'd have to
Hmm.
roll them up, and oh gosh, it was
Yeah.
such a tedious process. But it was just like a weekly deal, and then I was
Cheap
like, hey, let's do
childhood labor,
Saturdays.
if you think about it. It
I
wasn't not
know.
very pleasant. I remember
True.
as
It wasn't
well
very fun.
the manager sitting me down at my mom's kitchen table, and they're like, we're sorry, but hand over." The Daily News was a red bag with like,
Hmm.
those running stripes that people put on their clothes or used to. It would be down like the strap
Yes.
of it, and they're like, "We need your bag back."
Oh
I don't
my
even know if I
goodness.
knew where it was. I should have thrown that in the river too. But
Well, was it just a one-time thing for you, or was this consistently you
no,
were
this was
throwing the
daily.
papers away?
Oh no, yeah, no. When
Oh,
it was really heavy, I don't know which days were like Wednesdays were horribly heavy, or like there was a lot of news, or they put like extra stuff in it. But I was just a
okay.
little lad. So some mercy for me, please. Like this was huge. I'm like, these guys don't read the paper. It's going to McDonald's. They don't. Who's reading the paper? But apparently, a lot of people. They really cared. So after
That's
your
funny.
newspaper experience.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to ask you about your dad. And you
Yeah.
saying, and I find this
Yeah.
interesting because being a parent now and
Yeah.
working and trying to pay bills and all of that, were you
Hmm.
able, because you said he had two jobs, but you were able
Yeah.
to play and hang out on the weekends. Was he
Yeah.
able to do that well? But while at the same time he's trying to do his best to support the family, and I think you and I
Yeah.
probably have that same experience. We're like, well, I got
Yeah.
to do this, honey. I got to get this done. This is work, but I want
Hmm.
to make, as you and I were talking about, I want to make mud pies with you.
Uh-huh.
I just,
Yeah.
I can't do
Yeah.
it just right now. I really got to get this done. Do you remember that being, or did he manage that well?
So I actually kind of grew up with two dads.
Yeah,
So and it's funny because I just in a nutshell, my parents were divorced when I was really young. So,
mine too.
I'd go to my biological dad's house like every other weekend, like clockwork. So he and I were tight. And then about the age of 10, my mom remarried. And it's funny because my my dad remarried the same year. They were like 11 months apart. They both got remarried. But my stepdad, it's like he taught me different skills than my real dad, my biological dad did. And I would say when I compare the two, I end up being much closer to my stepdad, probably because I was living with my mom and, I'd see my stepdad every single day. But, whereas when we go back to, like my dad, I'd see every other weekend, it's a different kind of skill set that they taught me. And I would say that for both, in the time and the era that we were living in, 80s, 90s, it was very much like, you work hard, you play hard. So I
Hmm.
feel like even till this day, I'm still striving. If I can still be like a fraction of how they were at my age, I would be blessed. I still feel like I'm running towards that goal of still being able to juggle everything. And I'm a single parent, so I think that adds more to the spice. But my parents are nearby, and so they offer a lot of support. But I would say, yeah, I think that I never felt like I got, hey, honey, I don't have time. I got to work. It
Hmm.
was always so eloquent the way that they illustrated how they always wanted to include me. They always
Hmm.
wanted me to be a part of the process versus, hey, I got to work on this, so give me some time. Whereas it's funny when I compare my fathers to
Hmm.
my mom was always like, more selfish with her time, I guess. And
Hmm.
so I've always strived to be more like my dad's, like,
Yeah.
hey, well, I got to do work. Why don't you come along with me? So that really opened my eyes to say, okay, when I have kids later on, I want to include them in the process. I want them to know that they need to have those skills to work hard as well, but also to moderate their time so that they can, play hard as well. Yeah.
How did you, well, what was the next job you did, or
Mhm.
how long did you go as a paper delivery person until?
I don't think it was very long. I think I kind of got bored. It's just that um, it was fun like during the summer months, but when it was during school time, I suffered from procrastination so long. It took me probably until college to kind of nip that in the bud. But I think probably I only had it for a couple of months then I
And
was done
it's
with it.
and it seems like, and I was thinking this as you're mentioning it, because say
Yeah.
someone else mentioned, Marie said, it's
Mm.
I like actually talking about a paper route because I hope
Hmm.
someone's going to listen, and it could be, you said a 10, 11, 12-year old, or someone who's
Yeah.
like, I don't have a job.
Hmm.
Doing a job like that is a good way to start or to get back
Hmm.
going or do because I see, you and I both work in Korea. They have like van services that they just pile up the
Hmm.
newspapers. They go to apartment, they grab a stack and they drop it off. So it's like a flyer
Yeah.
delivery service. It's just there's a
Hmm.
job available somewhere that you can start. And even though we're just talking about delivering papers, I think there's a
Hmm.
work ethic that people can glean out of that is valuable. So like, oh, we're
For
still stuck
sure.
on being 10 years old and my first job. Well, no, that's
Hmm.
why I want to get into why we work. It's because I think
Hmm.
at all stages they are, whether they're steps or they're processes that help all of us out. So after delivering papers,
Hmm.
where did you venture off to next in your work life?
For sure. Yeah. I think there was a big gap of time. I mean, I was always super busy with my family, and we do, I really took advantage of those long, lazy summers. I think up until probably, I mean, my first real job was not until I was a senior in high school. I mean, I was really lucky. I didn't
Were you,
necessarily,
were you
you know,
not an
my, mm,
athlete as well? You were an
I
athlete.
was,
Not that
yeah,
you're
yeah, I
not
did
an
swimming
athlete
for,
now. You hear people like, well,
well,
I was
mm,
an athlete,
I
but
was,
I'm an athlete
that's
till I
funny.
die.
I know. Well, and then 40 years old hits and you're still like, arthritis. Uh, but no, I remember I started swimming when I was young. Well, I guess 10 was not young, but I swam with the Adrians. Nathan Adrian is Olympic gold medal back swimmer, backstroke swimmer. And his sister and we grew up together. We were best friends. So they were kind of the influence for me. I mean, yeah, I didn't grow up with a tiger mom like they did, and my parents didn't bust me out to 2 hours away to do hardcore swimming. But yeah, I had kind of the early bite of the competitive, the competitive sports world. And so I did swimming for quite a number of years, and, continued that through college as well.
So that
Did
was
some
your
triathlon
sport.
training, and
That's what you
yeah,
pursued. So you went
yes.
to college as a swimmer as well.
No, because it was so cutthroat. I was also kind of the older the older swimmer athlete, and at the time I kind of fast forward, but I took a gap year off and studied abroad, and finally pursued my BA, and I was done by the time I was 24, but that was considered old, and I was just more of a kind of a coach's assistant. I did more of that role than I did actual competitive swimming. But I did definitely, participate in triathlons, and, I had a bunch of fun time over there. I was actually down in Louisiana State, so a big party school in Baton Rouge.
What was your job
Yeah.
as a senior in high school? What did
So going back, so in high school, I did competitive swimming, and yeah, I was the oh my goodness, I forgot my words. This is what I get when you spend so many years abroad. Some of the languages don't
Well,
come so
no, you
quick.
were gracious enough to interview now, and it's you're like 8, 9 on a Friday. People are winding down
It's so good.
usually at this time, not
I know.
not being
It's all good.
interviewed. So I thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to high school, I was captain of the swim team, and I loved it. But for the work, I didn't actually get a job until senior in high school, and I'd always do like odd jobs. I mean, I think that's kind of coming with the territory. I lived in a small town, and I'd mow lawns, and I would, I did a lot of cleaning. I feel like I did a lot of cleaning in people's houses, but, just odd jobs to kind of make some money here and there. But when I was in high school, I became kind of like what we call a mall rat. So I started working in the local mall, and I just went
Yeah.
from like one side of the mall to the other, and kind of got my taste for, what is commerce, and, you know, uh, getting a paycheck was
What
pretty fun.
when
And
you
that
say
at the time,
one side to the other, you just found a job in
yeah.
this place and then now I'm done with that and you went to different places like that?
Well, I mean, I think I was very picky about where I worked, but
Mhm.
I started at like a jewelry shop for girls, and I learned how to ear pierce, and then I became kind of like close to the what they call a key closer. And I knew that, working in, I don't know, retail sale was not going to be my forever thing, but it did
Yeah.
help, get some money and pay for my car insurance and get around putt putt with some gas. So, but yeah, it's funny because it wasn't like on purpose. It was just happened to be like I ended up working from one end to the mall within 2 years to the other
Yeah.
end and said, okay, I'm done being a mall rat.
So you said there was a lot of flexibility in your family. So can you
Yeah.
comment on, I remember, I don't know who it was, but it doesn't
Mm,
matter. Many years ago, I saw a lady and she looked at her child, and I don't know if the child asked for something, and she said, "No,
mm,
you can get it when you get a job."
mm.
And the girl was, I don't
Yeah.
know, let's say 9 or 10. So, and
Yeah.
I find I have that temptation, my kids, if they're not very happy with what they have, or, oh, they're
Mm,
getting more than me, or any of those things. I say, well, when
mhm.
you get your own place and you get your own job, you can do that.
Yeah.
Can you comment on what seemingly was your freedom? Because this is like, say,
Mhm.
North American culture versus a Korean culture, where Koreans
Correct.
do not need to get a job. Like, it's not
Mhm.
necessary until after university. And
Right.
so we come
Right.
from a culture where, okay, you can get a job at 9, 10, but
Mhm.
then you had the freedom, as you said, to enjoy your long summers. And so
Mhm. Yeah.
you could get some things that you wanted without having to work. Can you
Mhm.
comment on how that helped you, or maybe even hurt you? I'm
Mm.
not sure, of having that freedom to not be pressured by your parents to go get a job. Because
Sure.
some
Mhm.
parents throw that on, and it may be encouraged, like, you
Yeah.
job, but you don't need to, versus saying, get out of the house and go get a job.
Sure. No, I get it. And I think, I have to say that I think I was really blessed. I think if my mom had not met my stepdad, um, maybe my life would have taken a different turn and I would have had to be required to get a job and help support her and
Mhm.
us and our
Yeah,
family. But what I really appreciate, especially now that my stepdad is in his 70s, is that he really wanted me to enjoy my childhood. And
yeah,
I carry that to this day, still wanting my kids to not grow up
yeah.
too fast, and to still be kids. But I feel like, you know, we were in a very, because of his hard work, because that he, like oh my gosh, I don't know how he did it. Cause I think about like how crazy busy my life gets to be and how he was so well adjusted during that time. But I mean, he was always such a presence, and I felt like I had, no matter what, he always kept his temperament, and he was such a good role model. But I feel like because of his hard work, I was able to enjoy my summers and just spend time learning about life. I mean, like life skills, and I was able to change my oil in my car and change, do all the basic work on a slug bug that I had for my very first car. I got to learn to do fun things that a lot of kids my age probably didn't. I got to skiing. I traveled around. We went to Jamaica when I was younger. So I mean, like we went honestly from like, you know, close to welfare with my single mom to suddenly, going from mac and cheese to lobsters a few times a month, eating lobster and sushi and fish. It was such a huge difference for me. It really opened my eyes to, the kind of life in the world that I wanted to provide for my kids eventually. But have so much respect for both my dads because they worked so hard that they allowed me to really take my time to kind of grow and learn about the world and just kind of spend time me becoming myself. Yeah.
I had an interview the other day, and just the gentleman, which I adore, but it was hard, or is hard, to for him to see how hard his parents worked versus things that didn't actually go his way.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So it's taking him a while. I think he's starting to, and I hope that that he does see it. But sometimes we don't see our parents, and then we're like, oh, we're
Mm,
neglected. Well, no, you know what? Maybe
mm,
our parents really hate being away so much, and it breaks their heart. But they
mm.
have to do this for a period of time or whatever. I mean, and there's sometimes the parents just sacrifice their family to their work. It's that
Yeah,
hard
sure.
balance to try to meet. And into college,
Mm-hmm.
did you were working as well, or actually, what did you take in college? You were
Yeah.
swimming, or you were teaching, and what made you go abroad?
Yeah.
What was your intention in going to college?
Yeah. So, you know, I think because my parents had provided really so much for me, um, that I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to do it on my own. And so when I graduated high school, and I ended up staying around for a year or two at my local college, got some scholarships, learned how to be an adult, lived on my own, had a roommate. But it was probably when I first moved, had taken a vacation outside the country, went to Jamaica, and I believe I was probably 11 or 12, maybe even 13. But it was such an eye-opening experience to be in a different culture. That's really where I can say that I hit the travel bug, and I knew that I had to see this world that was in front of me. I had to see these cultures and languages and meet people. And so that was probably my first bite. But also in high school, I did an exchange to Belgium. Um, and I love the French language. I knew that that was kind of like my skill set, even though I had taken all these biology classes with a plan to work in a lab. I just knew I was going to be bored to death. So languages became
You had
kind
the
of like,
travel bug, but you're taking sciences to be stuck in a lab.
I know.
It would
I
have
was
been
like,
okay for 2020, but any other time, not so much.
right. So I mean, I follow my passion. I had a kind of a knack for languages, and started teaching myself French and just loved it. And I think that was probably like the precursor to eventually becoming an ESL teacher when I lived in Korea. But yeah, that was probably, going to Belgium and going to Jamaica. That hit me hard. So I knew that I had to have some kind of a travel plan on my resume, at some time or another. And then when I went to, I ended up going down. Actually, it's really interesting when I think about it. It's been a while since I really thought, but when I graduated, about a year after I finished high school, I was about one class away from getting my associate's degree, and I was like, I'm done. I need a break, and I just like woke up and said, I have this idea that I need to go to some place abroad in Europe. And so I had narrowed it down between Switzerland and the Seychelles Islands on the coast of Africa. And I got this idea from my aunt who, when she finished college, there was some family situation. She ended up being an au pair. And I thought, why don't I look into it? I've already practiced being an adult. At the time I was living with a boyfriend, we were practicing home life, and I didn't have the kind of fulfillment that I wanted. I wanted to experience the thirst of being somewhere else geographically and experiencing languages and cultures. So I ended up finding a family, and I went to Switzerland for a year. And I think that's what really, I say now that when I lived and worked there, I feel like I saw the world through rose-colored glasses.
Mhm.
And even now I feel like, that's where I have left part of me, because I learned so much. I took care of two young girls who I'm still friends with today after all these years. And I really enjoyed my experience there. So that kind of helped to frame my path, like having this adoration for languages and culture. I knew that was the direction I needed to go. And so when I went to college, I knew, hey, I'm going to be majoring in French. I just love the culture, and I'm accumulating as I travel and I learn new skills and meet new people. I just become kind of more of a walking history of the cultures and languages that I learn and the people that I meet. And it's kind of interesting to say that, but I ended up going down to Louisiana State University. And my biological dad and stepmom, they had moved down there a few years prior. In fact, when I finished high school, they're like, "You gonna stay here with us, or are you gonna travel down to Louisiana?" I said, "Nope, I'm gonna stay here." But yeah, so I got a vehicle and packed all my stuff and took a road trip, and thus began my college life at 21, and had some great experiences. But that's where I ended up studying French and international studies,
So did
with the
you
intention
take
to.
French besides prior to going to Belgium?
Sure. Yeah, I was, one of the language requirements is, you can
Okay.
German, Japanese, and in French, and I chose French. So that's where I kind of,
At what
kept my interest
at
in the
what
language.
grade did you start studying French, I guess?
Ninth grade,
Okay.
officially ninth grade, but I started teaching myself at the
Yeah.
local library earlier. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what was your hope in studying French, or were you planning on
Yeah.
being a teacher, or what was your end goal?
Sure. I did not even have an idea of being a teacher on my radar, but I had a plan to be a linguist, possibly work for the UN, be an interpreter or translator, do editing. And I loved the idea of maybe being like a tour guide of some sort.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I was hoping to do after
How old are you
college.
at that time?
Wow, let's see. So I graduated college in 2004, which I believe that makes me
You added
23,
the, yeah,
24.
you're adding the year.
I had
I
to
was just
think
wondering
about
at
that
that time, but yeah.
at that time. Yeah, I
Well, no,
was
I
23,
asked that
24.
because anyone
Yeah,
who listens who's 24 and under, you can listen to you
yeah,
now knowing that you didn't know what you were doing.
for sure. Oh, yeah. 23, 24, I still was like, I had worked for the Department of State for a bit. I did some translating. I loved it. I traveled, but I still wasn't set on what my purpose was, what my calling was, essentially my why. I did not know then, but I had a little better idea than I think I did before, graduating high school.
What point did you, during university or college, did you say, okay, I'm going to, or was Korea your next step, or was there something?
That was happen chance, my friend. Korea was never on my map. It was interesting. There's the story behind it. I'll try to give you the brief version, but usually I say, hey, we need a couple of beers and a couple of hours to talk about that. But it's interesting because after college, I moved back to Washington State. So from Louisiana State, moved back to Washington State. And I was only here for a couple of months. I knew that it was just going to be a transition stage, be with my family, hang out with friends. And I was working at the YMCA, and I ran into an old, middle school friend who had done a year in South Korea, and he ended up doing a midnight flight. And I was like, well, what is this midnight flight? Tell me about it. How was the experience? I never thought to go to Asia. And he goes, yeah, he gave me the rundown and how it went. But that it turned kind of sour toward the end. So we had to leave. And I thought, gosh, Korea.
But
So
what's
I
a
decided
midnight
I had to,
flight? I don't even know midnight
oh,
flight.
well, even back in the early 2000s when you were working at the Hagwons, the academies, right? A
A
lot of,
midnight
first
exit.
the midnight exit.
Yes, okay.
So
Yeah, yeah.
the midnight
Okay, I
flight,
got it.
yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I
Okay.
thought there's like this
Guess I don't have to
romantic
explain it.
flight to Korea at midnight and it takes you in and
Oh,
they settle you down and give you humbugs and stuff. But you mean
no,
the exile of expats who say,
exactly.
I'm done.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. For whatever reason, that's like,
Hmm. But a lot
woo.
stay.
Yeah.
So don't
Yeah.
get that wrong. I mean, just it's
Yeah.
not for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So, and for my friend at the time, it wasn't for him. He
Mhm.
wasn't meant to stay very, very long. But I had given myself a month. I'm like, hey, I think I want to try Asia. Um, I'm fresh with my BA. I did translation and interpretation, but moving to Washington meant I need to have credentials to do that. And I thought, I just finished school and I didn't want to work on that. So it was like time to travel again. Let's do it, Shells. And so I was watching this news channel, and it was one where you can watch Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And I just remember this watching the Korean news channel, and and this lady, this ajumma, had said the word chincharo, chincha, and I was like, what is this word chincha? It sounds really great. I don't know what it is, but maybe I'll try Korea. And within a month, I was on an
Based on,
airplane.
was
I
that, is that
know
like jinjayo? Like really?
chinchayo, yeah, chincha, like really, chincha.
Jinjayo. Really, really. Chelsea went to Korea.
Really.
Really.
I know, really. So
Unreally.
it's funny. My parents were like, "Are you ever gonna stay put somewhere?" Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and yeah, you couldn't catch me for very long because then I was up again moving. But yeah, within a month, I was on the airplane learning how to say "annyeonghaseyo" and "ili samsa," and then the rest is history.
So how
So,
long did you stay here and how did
yeah.
that define, I mean, because I couldn't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure you're still in the
Yeah.
same field.
Yes.
How did you find that helped coming here, helped you as
Yeah.
a person, helped define your present role?
Yeah. I would have to say that first that I've always been kind of interested in the educational field and helping in some way, shape, or form people, kind of presenting my best self and helping others along the way. When I went to Korea, I really didn't have much experience in teaching, and I remember my Hagwon saying, "Here's your book. See you Monday." And I didn't know what to do, but I had to learn to get myself, together and get some food and
Hagwon
get
being
ready
an
to go, be
academy,
ready.
equivalent to an
I
academy,
know.
a Hagwon. Yes, it's like, here's your book. Start on this page with the
Yep.
midnight guy just
And so
left. You're
honestly, like,
starting.
exactly. That's kind of how it felt. It was just such a different world. And just as a side note, I remember I lived in this really small suburb of Daegu, and it took me a month to leave my little area. And I remember going across this bridge and seeing this other white-skinned girl, and I had not seen nobody but Korean faces everywhere in the first month. And I was just like, how am I going to do this? And I remember we were looking at each other and we are so excited. We're like, oh my God, there's another foreigner here. Oh, and so we didn't even know each other from the
Like
neighbors.
your
And we're
best
like, where are
friends.
you from? Exactly. Oh, just those times. I tell you, I can write a book. But it's just those little things that just kind of drove my thirst. And I think it was such a treat to not only learn like really about the teaching field, because that's kind of where I got my passion for teaching and knew that is what is that I'm meant for. That's my calling in life. And I think I'm always going to look at Korea, professionally in a kind of a bittersweet sense, because I was blessed in so many ways. I never had any really negative experiences when it came to teaching or my work over there. Personal is a different situation, but for professionally, I really, really loved the culture, the system, the teaching opportunities that I had. And I think that experience helped to define really kind of how I view teaching. And I always, I think probably with my experiences in traveling abroad, excuse me, and my languages, I think I always try to intertwine that in my classes and the students that I meet.
In what is that thing that you gained um, the most knowledge about to make it applicable to where you are now? What
Sure.
is it? Are you saying that you made it like almost a soundboard from which
Mm-hmm.
to present and plan all of
Mm-hmm.
your lessons that you do now? Is that,
Mm-hmm.
in what way? What did you realize? I mean, because as you're
Yeah.
saying it, I'm thinking, maybe you realize there's a lot of teachers that don't really plan that well and they don't teach that
Yeah.
well, but they're doing this job. And okay, so I know that
Yeah.
you can do that bare minimum and
Mm-hmm.
still be a teacher, but that's not the way I don't want that to be my job. I don't want that to be my
For
work.
sure.
Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying, and how you took this as a starting point from which to leap off into your career? In what way did you do
Absolutely.
that?
Okay. So, honestly, I think having still kind of limited view about the teaching field in America, it wasn't until being in Korea that I was able to really kind of scale down the purpose of me teaching in Korea. And I think probably most importantly, what I've gained is probably a lot, how do I just say, I've become a jack of all trades,
Hmm.
right? So I've gained such a, a lot of information, so I kind of know a little bit about everything, right?
Yep.
So I think in my course of being in Korea, which was quite a bit. I mean, I was there from 2005 until 2010, came back to the States for a year and a half, and then from about 2012, fall 2012 to 2014, I was in Korea. So I guess that's what, about 7 years, 7.5 over the span of 10 years. And so I think that, part of my mission per se is I'm a storyteller. And so, there's always something I can draw from my experiences. I did have some pretty icky experiences in Korea, but the more positive ones, they overshadow those ones, those negative ones. But there's always something that can be said for those experiences, right? They're teachable. They're lessons that I try to bring to my students and to my work on a daily basis. And they kind of reinforce that even though some of the things that I've experienced in my life were not ideal, that I am where I am because of the choices I've made and my experiences in teaching and traveling so far.
So from the time that you first left Korea, was that, okay, I'm going,
Mhm.
never coming back, or I'm going to go do
Yeah.
something for a little while and then return, or you're like, well, this home wherever you went was not as
Yeah.
what it was cracked up to be. What was your
Yeah.
career path moves during those later,
Sure.
the first time leaving, coming back, and then returning to where you are?
For sure. So, this will kind of maybe edge a little bit more into the personal side, but it was the person that I was with was making life pretty difficult. I realized that there was, raising kids in Korea was wonderful. I loved it, but it wasn't what I expected it to be in
Mm-hmm.
my situation. And I realized that I wasn't living my authentic self. And it's interesting to say that, and I don't know if you can agree, but being in a different culture for a very long time, you get to the point where no matter how much you have accumulated in terms of, you know, um, cultural knowledge, language, ins and outs in being fluent and free and living in that society, you never truly become them. Like I was never like, I will never ever become Korean, even though I felt more Korean at times than American. But I realized that I wasn't doing myself a favor or my kids a favor, kind of where I was trying to juggle my personal life and my teaching life. And I kind of needed a reset. And so for me, coming back to the States was kind of what I needed. At the time, my youngest son was, 2.5, and my daughter was only a few months. And so we had the chance to be
Moving,
back with my
that's
folks and just,
hard in itself.
oh, believe me, I know this. Oh my gosh. I mean, and to think how hard it was when I was a single gal and then
Hmm.
having kids in tow, it was such a different story. It was like, fight or flight. And
Well, you think
again,
you can
great stories,
remember
but
when, I'm sure you can remember when you first came to Korea, you get off the airplane,
yeah.
you maybe get a taxi, you had your backpack that you had since college, maybe high school,
Mhm.
and your trusty bag, and then now you're leaving with a couple of kids. Like, what?
I know. Oh my gosh. It was crazy. It was crazy. It was, and you just learned so much, not only just about yourself, but about how to maneuver. Because,
Hmm.
at the time we were a third culture family.
Hmm.
It's like we were Pakistani American. My then husband is Pakistani, so Pakistani American, but raising our kids in the Korean culture. So it was like mind-boggling to be like, three languages on the daily, and people are like at home going, "How do you function?" But you just learn and adapt. So
When you went back, did you decide, okay, I'm gonna take teaching more seriously? Did you have to get a teaching
yeah,
degree? Were you thinking of professional development? What was
sure.
on your mind then?
Yeah. So when I came back, I just knew that teaching was for me. And I started my master's degree then, but my kids were young and it was hard to balance like late nights with master's
You're
work,
doing a
12-page
master's
papers.
degree with kids. Yes, it's hard to
Yeah,
balance.
it was
What do
hard.
you mean? As a single mom?
um, yeah, 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 yeah. And
That's pretty hard.
so, but even back then, I think sometimes it was easier than it is now. I've got tweens that are like going on 16, 18, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes those earlier days were easier than
Not so
dealing with
bad.
teenagers
Go
now.
to your crib. Now it's like, you can't talk to me. What do you
I
mean?
know. I know. Oh Lord. So yeah, I mean, I think, the second time around, I really felt like I really wanted to get to know, it wasn't just, learning on the fly. I really wanted to know the academic part of
Hmm.
teaching. And so for me, it was like I'd gotten my, oh goodness, a couple of certifications as well. And I just felt like I was able to get to be, oops, we
A
have someone
visitor.
coming in to visit. Hey, sweetie, mom's online. Okay. You want to come say hi real quick?
Hi, real quick.
This is Brian. Come say hi real quick. Real quick, real quick. Say
Hello.
hi. What is your name?
Tanya,
Yes. How
I'm
old are you?
Brian. Nice to
five
meet
and a
you.
half.
You're
Yes,
5.5. You're a big boy.
he is. Yep. And he's interviewing me. So can you come
Want to
talk
see
to
how
me
much
after?
muscle I got?
You definitely have more muscle than I have. That's
Oh.
reality.
Never a boring day.
Hey, nice to meet you. You want to see how much muscle I have? That's awesome.
I know. That only worked in our adult world now,
Yeah, let's see how much
Here's my business
muscle
card.
you
Here's my
got.
muscle. Oh, you have toys? I love toys. What-
Well,
Let me see how much your muffle has.
Oh, is that what you said? I thought you were gonna show me. It's really, if I turn around backwards and push it up like this, it looks a lot bigger.
it'd be big, huh? Yeah.
You know, my son
You got
does
some
the
muscle
same
growing.
thing. My son is 5.5, 6, and he does,
Mhm.
Papa, let me see your muscles.
Yep.
I'm like, Benjamin, I'm
Awesome.
40 something and I don't have any.
40 something.
40 something.
47.
43. It's
Yay.
young. Listen, I know it seems
Yes.
very old
Very
at
young.
5,
I don't know.
but
Hey, can you
40
take him
is
outside,
young.
Becca?
My
I
mind
know,
is
we
young,
are.
just the body doesn't agree.
I feel you on that one. Okay, take him outside, baby. Thank you. Love you.
You're a lot more patient than I'd be. I'd be
Okay.
given like dirt.
I knew that was gonna happen at least once, but
What are you guys? No, they can't see me.
I'll be that newscaster
Oh, I
who's
know.
on live air, and the baby comes in with the mom who's dragging the kids
You
out the
can't
door.
ever look at that guy with a straight face. I don't know if he kept his job or not, but no, how can you look at him like you're the guy?
Hilarious. I'm like, I feel you, man. I know exactly what you're doing, what you're experiencing.
His wife tried so hard to save the moment, just made
I
it
know.
much worse.
Oh, okay.
So
I'll
you
be out
said
in a
you
little while,
took
okay? Yeah.
a few courses and certificates, and
Yes.
did you
Yeah.
know where you wanted to go, what you want to do exactly? I mean, that's a whole process for people. I just today actually I received
Yeah.
a Hawaiian provisional license because I'm trying to get
Oh.
one out of DC. So I just got it today. I was shocked. So did you I mean, to people who are going to college, to
Yeah.
thinking about being a teacher, like there's some things that
Yes.
you might want to think about because those things take time. And it's not that they're overly difficult, would you say? It's just a
Yeah.
little tedious. You got to be organized. And, you
Right.
know, the idea of in life of anything, I think is good advice of looking at
Right.
the goal of where you want to be and say, if it's a teacher, well, figure out all those little things so nothing surprised you along the way. So how did you go through the weeds of that thing after you
Sure.
came back?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, and I had gone through, I think I didn't go the CELTA route, but I mean, I did get, you know, my certification and I was able to kind of look at, you know, when you got your certification for teaching ESL, you kind of looked at it a little bit more, you know, professionally. And so that kind of gave me a leg up to, you know, working at Younggen and then going to, you know, Kyungpook later on, which was actually on my return back, is I went back to Younggen College and was like a resource kind of teacher because I had, you know, that experience. And I think that kind of opened up the door for me in a lot of ways. And my last place of work was Kyungpook, and I loved it there. I loved just the time and, you know, the professional, the hours that we worked is quite a bit different over there than it is over here. I feel like sometimes we're in a rat race here in North America, whereas I feel like, you know, like you mentioned, you know, you've got time and space to breathe, and, you know, you're not scrambling to make it all work when you've got a little bit more peace and less chaos, you know, going on.
Kevin Barry,
But
sorry,
yeah,
you know, Kevin
yeah,
Barry, I once mentioned
yeah.
to him, I was like, oh, I
Uh,
was thinking about going there. Brian, Korea is 1/10 of the work and time of what you experience on a real job. He said he didn't mean it in a bad way, but
yes,
it's just like
yes,
it is so competitive, right? Like, and you
yes.
need your certificates, you need this and that,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
papers, and you need to stay on. I
Yeah.
mean, like an athlete, right? You have to stay at the
Yep.
top of your game because there's people out there trying to take your job, or you can't get
Yeah.
promotions and all of that. So it's,
Hmm.
you know, teachers I think are getting a little bit more respect this year
Hmm.
for the amount of work they do, because parents are realizing, hey, my kids are home all the time and this isn't as fun, and oh, I need to know some of these things. And I don't
Yes.
know if that's going to be an improvement. I think I saw in England that they gave nurses
Yeah.
a big raise or something, a biggest raise ever. So maybe teachers will
Sure.
fall in line and for that as well.
I hope so.
So
Yeah. Hmm.
what was your goal in teaching, that
Sure.
you would just pursue the ESL route? Is that what you were hoping in a particular school,
Hmm.
particular district? What were you hoping?
Sure. Well, it's funny because when I went back to the States, I realized that I really lacked a lot of knowledge about, you know, the regular teaching field. You know, I taught from kindergarten forward up to the, teaching college in South Korea. And I really wanted to, I loved it. And I felt like that was where I was meant to be. Coming back to the States, I really lacked a lot of content knowledge. And just in general, like, how does the school system really work? I really wanted to kind of dig in deep. And I worked as a substitute teacher, so that gave me a chance to kind of get an idea of how the classroom is run. But it opened my eyes to the difficulties that a lot of teachers have to deal with, not just administration, but like behavioral challenges. And let me say, wow, it was such a huge difference to be in the Korean classroom, whereas you're not dealing with behavioral issues. Yeah, granted, for the younger kids, you're doing more TPR and you're doing fun activities, but in the American classroom, at least in this neck of the woods, and I have to say it's probably almost everywhere, but there's a lot of behavioral challenges that are linked to kids' socioeconomic backgrounds and a lack of parents at home and a lot of free time, and it kind of drifts into the classroom scene. And there were some days working as even as a substitute where I just had to resort to games because we had so many behavioral issues. And the classrooms are so varied, not just with age level and not age level, but abilities, and kids now coming with so many other issues, ADHD, 504 plans, all these things I have to take in account. It does take a lot to juggle everything, so so that's what I did. As I was a substitute teacher for quite a while, and I was still raising my young kids, and so, but I knew that I wanted to really become like a real teacher, because it's funny, as a substitute, you always get the question, are you really a teacher, or are you just practicing? And so, it's kind of like you're not really considered a teacher until you got your certification, right? So I
Well,
did end up going through.
even in Korea,
Yeah,
where like if you've worked in a school with other Korean teachers, there's nothing against them. English
yeah,
teachers are not really highly thought of either, right?
yes, yeah,
You're not really a teacher,
yeah,
and maybe it's
yeah,
true for most people, but we're trying, and we're
yes,
learning.
I think
And
so. Yeah,
so when
yeah, I
you
think. Mm.
pursued your so at that point you were certified and you were just waiting for a job or looking for an opening is
Well, so what I did was the alternative route to certification.
Yep,
I was what we call an emergency certificated teacher.
yep.
Um, and so you had to go through like a slew background and get kind of like what they call support or reinforcement from other teachers, and your background, all that good stuff. But anyway, so I think in Canada they call it like a supply teacher,
Sure, yes.
at least in Victoria. Okay,
Hmm.
so here, yeah, we're substitute teachers over here. But anyway, so it allowed me to do basically take over the teacher of record, when they were gone. And so, you know, I did end up going through the StarTech program. So I went with City University. So it basically gave me like a year and a half, and I could, it was streamlined. So I can take all my experience as a teacher, working abroad, and kind of, use my on the fly experiences to get through my coursework. And so there's a program in Seattle called Star Talk, and it's funded by the government. And so I was learning how to actually teach the Korean language to ethnically Korean kids or kids that wanted to learn Korean.
It's
And we did
pretty
that for a
interesting,
summer.
isn't it? That's pretty
It
awesome,
was
actually.
great. Oh, yeah, I loved it. I really enjoyed my time over there. And then, the my level of Korean was not where it
No,
would be to translate.
yeah,
So I was like, maybe I'll just go ahead and do elementary ed, because,
yeah.
I found out that I loved fourth and fifth grade kids. So that's what I focused on. And we have this big teacher project called the Ed TPA, and I did mine in math. So I taught fifth grade for a while, and just love that program, and got certified through, or I will be soon, still waiting for the second part of the program, which is sort of to get my teaching endorsement in ELL. And I figured, since I took so long teaching, ELL or ESL in South Korea, that it makes sense, because we're kind of in need of ELL teachers. So this is kind of the second year of my program. I'm technically done, but I'm still waiting for my kind of like my class internship for my ELL portion. And since COVID hit, it kind of like put everything on pause. So we're kind of waiting to see, how I can
So
get my hours in for
even
that.
this, and I'm not trying to, I won't think back to reveal age, but
Yeah.
even at your age, our ages,
Even at my age. Yeah.
you're not done yet. You're
Yeah.
not fully
Yeah.
certified. You're not, but you're on your
Yep.
path. So
Yes.
when
Yep.
people think, oh, I'm 20 something, I can't
Yes.
take a
Yep.
course, right? Or you
Hmm.
even said I was 24 and I was old, right?
They don't know
No,
nothing.
not right.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yep.
30 something. I got to take a course, or I can't learn. People
Yeah.
say you can't teach old dogs new tricks, but you can, and you
Yeah.
can learn, right? Like if you
Yes.
have that drive and the motivation
Absolutely.
to do so, and you're
Sure.
not seemingly stopping. Can you just?
Yeah.
It's a small point, but could you
Yeah.
say, for like, not a warning, but some
Hmm.
advice for people who are considering going overseas to teach, and then they might
Sure.
have the inkling to go back to their home country and teach?
For sure.
You kind of touched on it, but
Yeah.
what they might want to consider the major difference? Because for me,
Hmm.
teaching and the
Hmm.
experience I've had, which I would like to know your response to, is
Hmm.
the difficulty of teaching ESL, and you said not really fitting in.
Hmm.
That I think
Yes.
that makes the capsule even more encapsulating, and
Yes.
restricting. But
Yep.
then now you're where you are, and you can go visit your mom or dad or whomever, and you
Yes.
can kind of escape that. But you also just mentioned, now you're dealing with behavioral issues, socioeconomical issues, and things that you wouldn't deal
Yes.
with here. So you're not
Hmm.
going to find the perfect place to work. But where, if a teacher, if someone, recent grads, like, I'm going to grab my backpack and a ticket and I'm going to go, and then
Sure.
what should I do? What should I be weary of when I
Hmm.
decide to go back and be a teacher? Can you kind of
For sure.
go with both of those?
Absolutely. Okay. So, first of all, I am such an advocate for students to take like a gap year, to take time to kind of get to know themselves and what their skills are. And I think right now, I think there's still a lack of kids really knowing what they want to do. And a lot of times they're kind of like, they're steered by their parents or maybe their backgrounds or their idea of what they think might lead them to success. And honestly, if I could go back and redo it, I think before kids, I would have got my master's degree. I still have that to finish up yet, right? But I think that we kind of get stuck on, well, this is my age and this is what I should have accomplished by now. And so there's still some reality checks that I have to do on myself to say, okay, this is where I'm at and I'm okay with it because this is where I know I'm going and this is my plan. So I think for kids that, want to say, hey, I want to explore the world. I want to go travel. I want to meet people. I want to do different things. And I think that is totally okay. And I think we need more people to do that,
Hmm.
honestly, because I think they
Encourage people to
encourage
make
that
that decision. Yeah.
for sure. But I also, I'm very practical and this is reality. You have to find a way to make it work. And that means you got to make the money, right? And so, I think there's kind of like a dichotomy in a way between, what we want to do, which is our passion, and things that, we kind of have to do. And, as we become parents, we realize how those are vital to like survival,
Yeah.
not
You
just in
cannot separate them.
personal but professional life. You
They're
cannot. Yeah.
different, but you just can't
Yeah.
separate them.
Exactly. So I think it's important that, the student would have, yes, they would say, okay, this is what I want to do. And they go for it, satiate that passion that that experience that you want to have, but know that this is your end date and this is what we're going to go next. There's always going to be, curves and bumps in the road. And I think it's really all about how you get back up again. It's like the process, not necessarily the end result, but I think you kind of have to have that joie de vivre, which is like joy of life and
Hmm.
the passion that goes with it. But you also have to have one foot in the ground and be a little more practical and think about which is the most realistic way to get there, right?
With
So,
the students who's teaching in any, it could be any country, it could be China, it could be
mhm,
Japan, it could be South America.
right?
Um, with looking at transitioning back, do you have any
Sure.
insight into, you should, and then what you were just saying, I was thinking,
Hmm.
because some teachers will go away for a year or two, and I say it to everyone that I've ever
Yeah.
met, like, if you go over 2 years, you're putting yourself behind the eight ball. Like unless you have,
Yes.
and it's not impossible, obviously, to do
Hmm.
something, but unless you have an
Sure.
inheritance or a family business to go to, you fell behind in the country that you were in to the people who
Yes.
you graduated with, and now they're
Hmm.
off. So you're going to have to start lower, which is, if you're fine with it, then that's perfectly
Hmm.
acceptable. But I
Sure.
see a lot of teachers who come here in particular and waste their time and not do a little bit of course here and there,
Yeah.
and it could have been done so easily. So how would you
Yes.
suggest that someone makes
Sure.
best use of their time while also
Hmm.
considering the transition to their home?
Absolutely. I think that's very important. I think that uh, I have to congratulate you for saying that, because I think so many expats that come back to their, their natal country, experience not just reverse culture shock, which I did
Hmm.
for still kind of many years, but realizing that, dang it, I'm behind where my colleagues are, because they've
Hmm.
been here, they've been teachers for many years, and I'm
Hmm.
still like, I've got 20 years of teaching experience, but I'm still considered kind of like, newbie teacher, first year teacher, and so I think that that can kind of take a toll, I think, on your ego. And so having started over quite a few times, I just had to realize that I needed to be okay with where I
What
was
do you
at. But
mean? I've been in another country for a decade. They're like, no,
I
you're
know,
your teacher.
doesn't that mean something? I know. And honestly, it is hard. It is. And I know a lot of friends that are still on the path less wandered, traveling abroad still, but you kind of have to look at the picture of the future. And it took me probably having kids and moving back home to realize, not so much that I wasted time, but that I
Hmm.
feel like I wish I would have done things a bit differently. I wish I
Hmm.
would have been more like, right on that path to getting my teacher and my certification, so that by now I'd be like, 8 years in with certification and making, decent money. Now it's, sometimes it's hard and it's a struggle, but I would say that it's the transition back. There's going to take some time. You're going to take some time when having spent so long abroad, which I did. But I think that you just have to be happy where you are and set your goals and reach them.
Were any of the courses you took online? Did you do anything
Hmm.
correspondence while you were away? And did you find that valuable in whether defining,
Hmm.
or was that just part of the thing that you've already accepted as doing? So did you
Hmm.
say, I'm going to take a course here just to get my toe in the water? Or
Sure.
was that just part of the program you've already decided to do?
Well, let's see. Are you talking about like when I was in Korea, when I moved
Yeah.
back,
So
or?
when you were in
Mhm.
Korea, did you take any online
Sure.
courses to
I
kind of?
did actually. Yeah, sure. In fact, when I was, in fact, that when I came back to Korea the second time, I had that length of time that I worked on my master's degree, and I started, I continued that in Korea, but realized that at the time I had wasn't where I wanted it to be. I wanted to
Hmm.
experience more culture and hands-on than I wanted to study academically. So it wasn't until I came back to the States that I took it more seriously, studying online and did hybrid models and
Hmm.
yeah. So like I
It's
said,
I asked that because I think, especially nowadays, but there has become the gap between in-class learning versus
mhm,
online learning, I think is catching up to one another, or
sure.
there's becoming a parallel, or and I think there's a lot of value in people who do not know what they want to do, but if
Yeah.
they just
Hmm.
take a little course, they could be, the secret little
Yes.
person in their little internet world, taking something
Hmm.
just to get a taste of it rather
Yes.
than diving right into it and saying, well, I can't afford this whole thing. And there's, of course, I mean, you can do some
Absolutely.
research, but
Yes.
the
Yep.
value of further education, lifelong learning. And then if you find something
Hmm.
that has gained your attention, um, then by all means, give it a try.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, when I think about it, I had laid my master's degree down, but I was taking, mock courses through Coursera and Udemy, and I think that's how I said Udemy,
Yeah, yeah.
Udemy.
I took a
Um,
one through that too at one point.
yeah, and there's lynda.com. It's almost like there's no excuse to not better yourself. And I think
Mhm.
being in the career at the time, I had obviously more time and more space to be able to take that time and do that. But I think in today's world, we kind of, it would behoove ourselves to enrich ourselves, not just to help us further our goal, whether it be for a career, but also our skills, and I think that, we tend to focus on those macro skills, especially when it comes to like, landing the next job or having the skills to be, one off or to be better than the next, candidate. But I think those micro skills, when it comes to like soft skills, those things are, I learned a lot of different skills being in Korea that I find that a lot of, the people who are in my hometown, they don't have those because they didn't have, they didn't travel abroad. They didn't learn another language. They didn't, they weren't necessarily forced to learn to live and thrive in a different culture. So, and I think that's what sets me apart. And that's why I'm still I'm on, being a teacher, you never stop learning. Right. So I think it's all about, what can I bring to the table and what can I share from my experiences.
Chelsea, what is the biggest difficulty you've found, whether as a paper girl or as a teacher or in between? What is the biggest difficulty or challenge you came across in working that maybe you overcome, or something that it sits back and you remember that, so that maybe motivates you to keep on going? What it was the biggest challenge that you came across?
I think I feel like my time in Korea was so blissful and like life was almost easy in a lot of ways, coming back to the States, it was like, and my mom had told me this, she'd come to Korea once or twice a year when we were living there and saying, this isn't real life. This is not real. And it's like, but it is for, where we are at right now. This is real life. I'm working 20 hours a week and it's full time, and I've got, privates on the side. But it really was a wake-up call coming back home. And I think, I don't know, I think that I finally realized that, my train of thought, but overcoming probably, I'll just say I wasn't a type A personality. In fact, I was like more of an introvert in a lot of ways. And I think that I became more of an extrovert being in Korea, but I still kind of dealt with that being courageous and brave and having the confidence in myself. I think teaching brought that out of me. I feel like, it's kind of like a sink or swim, in Korea, I feel like we were just allowed to float, we weren't quite teachers, but we were having fun and learning about the world. But back home, I feel like you gotta make it or you don't. And so I feel like from my teaching experiences, that I've become much more forthright. And also I think probably because of my age, I'm a real algebra now. I mean, like, if I don't like something,
I'm not
I
an
tell someone
ajashi.
right
What are you
away.
talking about? We're not. Come on. So
Oh, goodness.
as a swimmer, you were here going, this is not swimming. And now you're back stateside and you're like, I'm an Olympian.
Oh, I tell you, for real, it was. And I don't know if you know, but did you ever go to, this is a side note, but did you ever go to the gymnasiums in Korea, like the workout centers, the pools, and go have yourself a swim? Did you ever experience that? Because you've
I've
been
been
in
in some,
Korea longer.
I've been in some
Okay.
pools, not like a gym membership type of thing, but I've been in.
Okay.
Your son asked a moment ago. Of course, I've been to
Yeah.
the gym. Can't you tell?
Got muscles.
Let me see your muscles. A couple. I've been to a
Okay.
couple.
Okay.
Maybe
So,
accidentally. I don't know.
so, part of being in Korea, I mean, I stayed pretty fit throughout my pregnancies in Korea. But, I went back to swimming and it was a big wake up call because you can't just go to a pool and swim. You got to sign up for a class. And so you're kind of paired with other people with similar, kind of skills as you. But it was hilarious to like stand in line with other Koreans and like swim the lane and then wait in line and then swim the lane and then wait in line. That was like what it was like. Same thing with the elevator. We could probably talk for hours about this elevator theory. Who goes out? Who goes in? Who's first? Who's second? Oh my
No,
gosh.
it's not no, there's no debate. Let the people out of the elevator
First.
before you
Exactly.
go in the elevator.
And I
It's not a
didn't
debate.
think it was my mind. I think we all dealt with that, like, as foreigners, you let the people out first before you go in. But
Yes.
likewise in the
Swim a
States.
lap, get out of
Yeah.
the pool or move to the side. Wait. Yeah, this is not what are you guys doing? This is not swimming.
Oh, I know.
Rotate Rotate.
Well, at least I can get into the pool when I want and take my own lane and swim as I please. So, at
So
least now.
what is your biggest joy you've encapsulated in
Yeah.
work experience? What are you able to?
Wow. That's great. How, I think well,
Well,
there's so
even to
many,
help
but
to define it, I wrote this out today.
yeah.
How is work help bring you through life? Because I think in that
Wow.
you're going to find the joy, right? Like how has
Yes.
your work and all the experience in
Right.
all of our difficulties, our heartaches,
Mm-hmm.
inside and outside of work, personal and professional, how has
Right.
work been the consistent through your life to be
Mm-hmm.
okay? Like I do have this, even though
Right.
sometimes it's an outlet, sometimes it's people do it too much, but how
Sure.
has work helped you?
Well, when you work and you make money and things are flowing well, then life seems to be a bit better. But I would say that, long story short, that those experiences have made me who I am today. And I feel that, I'm still on a mission to kind of tell my story. And the greatest joy for me is finding those students that didn't have confidence in themselves to know that they have the skills. They may not have it at that moment, but they're
Mhm.
building those skills. And I think for me, seeing a student successful in their learning and their academics, for me, that brings a lot of joy. Um, Also with my kids, as a parent, I think we can all kind of agree that as hard as teaching our own kids, we've learned this over the past 4 months during COVID-19, but I think that greatest joy is seeing in the progress that they've made and the confidence that they've built in themselves and knowing that they can do what they didn't think they could do.
And I think you would agree as well, like the patience that we often have to remind ourselves to grasp as we see
Mm-hmm.
our children, students, ourselves, people that we know,
Mm-hmm.
because the process is not always seen, right?
Right.
It's a
Yes.
daily, like, okay, are you getting what I'm saying? I've
Mm-hmm.
said it 10 times yesterday and you got me saying it again today. But that
Yes.
process it teaches us about patience, right? And people have
Yes.
been
Absolutely.
patient with us. So we would do well to be patient with others. So
I
where
agree.
can people
Yeah.
reach you if they want to reach you? Is there
Sure.
anywhere, or you just don't want to be reached if someone was looking to learn more about teaching and getting into even your state or
Yeah.
anything
Uh,
else?
Absolutely. Sure. My email address, if you look under Chelsea at TKE, I had a blog in South Korea, the Korean experience, and that's still on the web. I also have an Instagram, but I'm sure people just write Chelsea at TKE, they'll find me on Facebook, and I can connect with them and help give them some resources they need or they'd like for teaching and so forth.
Perfect, Chelsea. In
Yeah.
closing, what advice do you have for, and I say this each time, and I think it's the young kids, as the 10-year-old Chelsea with her paper route, the high school student who's thinking, oh, I better make a decision because there's a lot of pressure coming on me from somewhere. The
Mhm.
college student who has to pick a major, or oh, I'm graduating in a couple of weeks, what am I going to do? The one
Sure.
who's stuck in another country, doesn't a little fearful coming back and maybe being a failure or not knowing
Hmm.
what to do, or someone in a situation they lost their job. What sort
Yeah.
of encouragement, or like us, I
Hmm.
got to go to work today and I just don't wanna,
Yes.
what sort of encouragement would you offer to us?
Sure. For
And in
sure.
closing, could you say why you work?
Okay. So, I would say that remember that, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, whether you're in between jobs, whether you feel, excited for life or what's happening for you, or you're down and out, remember that what you're experiencing right now is temporary. Okay.
Mm,
And, as a parent and a teacher, sometimes you have to live within those moments, those stolen moments where you can stop, process, breathe, and then just say, okay, today wasn't a good day. I'm going to make tomorrow a better day. I would say that, take that time that you need to experience what you're going through, but also realize that you can become better. There's no limit for yourself, right? And I just think that, you know, everyone has their own route and their own mission and their own purpose. Sometimes it takes longer to get there. You know, I didn't realize that I was meant to be a teacher until I went to Korea and I traveled the world. And of course, having kids, being a mother also has taught me that, you know, it has even solidified my mission to be a teacher and a storyteller, and an advocate for women's rights, and, you know, for poetry and prose and all those good, wonderful, creative things that helped me to become who I am today. So I think why I work is to spread happiness and to continue my storytelling adventures.
Well, Chelsea, I truly appreciate you. And from a young boy who was raised by a single mom who tried her best to provide for me,
Mhm.
and the many children out there who experience that, we appreciate your efforts, and I think you're doing a great job. And
Mm.
I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you kindly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.